All right, it is time now to bring in our State House insiders. John Parker, our Republican strategist tonight, Antoine Seawright, our Democratic strategist. Jumping right into the Republicans in the race for U.S. Senate this past week, Senator Darlene Graham and Congressman Ralph Norman, the top two vote getters. John, any surprises there?
No surprises, and I'll tell you, I'm excited to see how this race turns out. I'm happy sitting here today because I know in 2 weeks, no matter what, we have an outstanding candidate for the general election. I've always been curious. South Carolina has had an interesting split for many years between Lindsey Graham and Jim DeMint conservatives, and we get to see that dynamic play out here on the ballot here in just a couple weeks, not even with Jim DeMint supporting Ralph Norman, and of course, Graham and his staff and the president on the other side. It'll be a really fascinating election to see how it plays out. And no matter what, we're ready to rock and roll for November.
Well, I think this is going to be a battle of who can outstream one another. And I certainly think that's more out of touch with South Carolina than both of the two candidates expect. Look, I'm very happy that Dr. Annie Andrews is on the other side, and who's going to make the direct case to the people of South Carolina about what she is for and how we need to reject the extremism that both of these candidates are going to bring. I was not surprised by the results because in a Republican primary, there are two important factors: name ID and infrastructure. Ralph Norman ran statewide for governor. End up endorsing the Republican nominee, Alan Wilson. So the residue of his infrastructure still was in place. I think the endorsement of people like Nikki Haley and others certainly helped. And then, of course, the Graham name, I think, played a key role in Darlene Graham as well as support for the president. Otherwise, without those two things, I don't think we will be having a conversation about Darlene Graham being the top vote getter in the Republican primary to replace her brother, Lindsey Graham. So nevertheless, we'll hear from them next Tuesday night in the debate. I certainly have not seen or heard them talk about any substantive issues other than who can out MAGA or who can out conserve the other. And I think that's a dangerous place to be in this environment.
John, what are you?
I just want to say, Antoine, to call them extreme when you have a candidate like Annie Andrews on your ticket is just comical to me. It doesn't get much more extreme than the Socialist Democratic Party of today. And then beyond that, both of these candidates have spoken on an awful lot of issues. They'll be speaking on more issues, as you pointed out on Tuesday. Ralph Norman has been thoroughly vetted. We understand where Darlene Graham comes from. We understand why the president is supporting her. And again, I think there is a nuanced difference between these candidates for sure. There is differences. But regardless, you're talking about conservative Republican candidates mainline with that line up with the values of South Carolina voters, which is those values are in sync with South Carolina, while Dr. Annie Andrews' values is totally out of sync with South Carolina.
John, I appreciate you saying that they've talked about the issues. If you mean the proof of citizenship bill by way of the SAVE Act, if you mean the largest cut to Medicaid in American history and the largest cut to SNAP benefits in American history by way of the big ugly bill, if you mean voting against the things like medical research, infrastructure, and dollars that flow to South Carolina to help the people of South Carolina, then sure, they have talked about issues, and those issues are out of touch and out of line with the American people as well as the people of South Carolina. And on the other hand, while I know fear and voter suppression and confusion and anger and sometimes racism has been a strategy for the modern day Republican Party, Dr. Annie Andrews is far from a socialist. In fact, she's rejected that. Nothing she's talked about point towards socialism. In fact, if you look at the 30 companies the United States has purchased private interest in or private equity in, that's the definition of socialism, and that's been done by the Trump administration. So when we talk about socialism, that is what Republicans are advocating for, not Democrats.
Look, the fact is that Dr. Annie Andrews supports the Socialist Democratic Party's agenda, the party of Mandami, the party of Bernie Sanders. That is what she supports. That is, if you send her to the United States Senate, you will be supporting that agenda. You cannot tell me that a person that has been very vocally supportive of packing the Supreme Court is not an extremist and does not have every intention of shoving the democratic socialist agenda down the throats of the American people. You can't tell me that a person who who refuses to do something as common sense as support American citizens only voting in American elections is not extreme and not for the American
Except,
pop. And for the socialist agenda here. So, but
John,
that's okay.
except there's nothing in the Proof of Citizenship Bill, better known as the SAVE Act, that points to directly that. In fact, it requires you to have certain things that's going to disenfranchise even Republicans. And so we'll have this
Are
debate going forward, and I look forward to Dr. Andy
Antoine,
Andrews
are we
debating one or two
disenfranchised
of the
here in
candidates
South
on the stage.
Carolina? Are we
Yes.
disenfranchised here in South Carolina by showing an ID? If you believe that, then you're telling me that you don't agree with the fact that it has been easier today for those who have had trouble having IDs to get an ID than ever before, and that's helped raise their quality of life.
Well, I look forward to the debate going forward.
All right, Antoine and John, as always, guys, thank you so very much for your time.